You're watching the Luca Rosano Show. Here's your host, Luca Rosano.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Luca Rosano Show, presented by Dave and Buster's VAUGHAN. As you can see, I got a very special guest for this week's show, Raptors play-by-play analyst for Sportsnet 590, The Fan, Eric Smith. Thanks for joining me. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Luca. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Eric. Just to kind of, kick us off here, how's quarantine life been for you? Give me the play-by-play of your daily routine.
Well, it's certainly changed in the last month or two versus the first month. As I think, some folks, some of your viewers probably were aware. When I came back with the Raptors, as a member of the broadcast crew, I fly with the team. So when we came back early March from the 11-day road trip and the final game in Utah, and in those 36 hours before the league ultimately shut down, I was tested for COVID. As the entire team was, and as a result of that testing, ultimately it came back negative. But there was some question then, and I suppose now, even though we've certainly learned more information, there was some question about the incubation period and 5 to 14 days, and the potential for false positive tests or false negative tests, etc. So, anyways, long story short is I opted to stay not just in quarantine, but full on isolation for 14 days in my house and away from my family. So that was definitely tough, sitting in one room and having my food left at the door by my wife, and she'd knock and walk away, and I'd grab the food and close the door and didn't have any contact with them for 2 full weeks.
Wow.
So that was difficult. But otherwise, since then, it's kind of been probably like a lot of people are going through. I mean, I think there are some that have maybe relaxed a little bit, and I'm not here to judge right or wrong whether they should or shouldn't, but some have been a little bit more lax in terms of what they do on a day-to-day basis, whereas there are others, like me. I haven't been in a store in 3 months, like no store. I've done and been lucky enough to do grocery delivery or grocery pickup on the curbside, and anytime I've needed to go to any other store for any other supplies, it's always been curbside pickup, whether it was Mother's Day gifts or birthday presents and whatnot. It's been curbside. So I literally have not physically stepped inside a store in 3 months. When I go out, if I'm going for a walk or a run or taking the dog out or whatever, I feel comfortable enough in the open air that I'm not walking around with a mask on, but I still try to keep, 10 feet, let alone 6 feet, and space myself out from people. But if I'm going anywhere where I might interact with folks, I've got a mask on. And then it's a lot of hanging out at the house, family movie nights, and a rotation between my wife and son and I, where, one gets to pick Monday, the other gets to pick Tuesday, the other gets to pick Wednesday, and we just kind of rotate through and watch a ton of movies and play in the backyard, getting some air now that the weather's nice. So it's kind of Groundhog Day every day now, but doing the same thing over and over. And I suppose in the grand scheme, knock on wood, as I'm literally doing right now, we're safe, we're healthy. And at this point, not to sound cliche or cheesy about it, that's the best we can ask for at this point, and just kind of keep our fingers crossed that we all get through this sooner than later, and we all get through healthy and sane on the other end of this. Because I think that's kind of the other factor for everybody right now. I would imagine, Luca, for you, for me, for everybody, is the mental health right now for a lot of people. Just being away from family, away from friends, away from regular routine, and just kind of being alone with your thoughts sometimes. And it's very easy to go down social media wormholes and go in a deep dive on Twitter, and suddenly you realize it's 3 o'clock in the morning, or you woke up early because your mind was racing, and suddenly it's 10 a.m. because you've just been staring at CNN for 3 hours or reading things on Twitter. And it's mentally exhausting. And I think that's going to kind of be the impact of a lot of this long term.
Yeah, it's wild to even think, Eric, just a year ago, we had the Raptors win the championship. You had a parade of almost 3 million people. And then fast forward a year later, and we're all stuck in quarantine. And hopefully, we get out of this sooner rather than later. But you touched on a lot of good things there, where that's something I've been saying too, just amongst friends and family. As long as we're healthy, we're sane, that's the most important thing. Basketball and sports and everything else kind of comes second, right? So that's very important to note. Speaking of which, going back to the Raptors Championship run, it's actually going to be the 1-year anniversary this Sunday, June 14th. You worked that Game 6. You, of course, saw the moment that will be forever remembered by every Raptors fan out there, of the Raptors winning the championship. Can you just describe your experience working that game and ultimately seeing a team that you've covered for so many years finally reach the pinnacle?
Yeah, there's no denying. First of all, I can't even believe that it's been a year. It's. I was just saying last night. My own Instagram thing on Tuesday night. I was talking to Leo Routens, and I said on one hand, these last 3 months, almost 4 months now, and hell, 2020 in general. When we think about at least in NBA circles, David Stern passing away, Kobe Bryant passing away, everything that happened in the first couple of months of 2020, let alone when COVID really started hitting hard, and ultimately the league shut down and the world shut down in that sort of first week of March, first 2 weeks of March. As long as this has felt these first 5.5 months, it still seems like the last year has gone by very quickly, because it doesn't seem to me like it's been a year. It doesn't seem to me like we already went through an off season and 65 games and a 3-month pandemic lockdown. It doesn't seem like all that has happened. So I'm shocked in many ways that it's been a year. But to answer your question, it was absolutely surreal. I was a fan in the stands at the expansion draft, the not the expansion draft, but the inaugural draft for the Raptors that was held back in '95 prior to the first season. I was a fan in the stands. I was one of those people that was booing the pick of Damon Stoudemire and cheering on Ed O'Bannon, and clearly how wrong was I, like so many people, and goes to show what I know. I was lucky enough by year 2 to be interning at the radio station and going down to cover games already in the second season, and by year 3, I was covering the team regularly, and by year 4, I was working the broadcast, doing pre-half and post alongside Chuck Swirsky and Jack Armstrong. So to see this thing come full circle, to have been covering this team for just shy of 25 years, almost since day one, to see them win the championship, to know that selfishly, and I say this without, or at least I hope without a shred of arrogance or cockiness or whatever, to know that I have a little bit of a piece of history being one of the voices, that called the game. To know that I had that little place in history alongside Matt Devlin as the radio and TV voices respectively that actually had the championship call. It was unbelievable. It was incredible. And then to be there, not just to witness, Luca, them winning the title, but then to see the celebration on the floor, and to be a part of something that you've watched as a fan since you were a kid. You've seen from a distance as a fan, as a kid, as a youngster, the confetti coming down and the presentation and the team together and the commissioner handing over the trophy. You've seen all that before. And I've been lucky enough to have covered a couple of other finals in a reporter type role for Sportsnet. But to be there and to see the team that you essentially work for, that you've been around for 2+ decades, to see it in person, it's on another level. And then on top of that, to see, God, at least 2,000, 3,000 or more Raptor fans in attendance, singing "O Canada" and there to take part in the celebration in Oakland. It was amazing, amazing. And then, I could keep going here, like to then leave the broadcast and go into the locker room and to be a part of the champagne showers while you're trying to conduct interviews. And then in the midst of all that and being drenched in all this champagne while trying to work, having somebody come to me and say, "Hey, as a member of the broadcast crew, you're welcome to come to the locker room, the secondary locker room, and take a picture with the trophy if you'd like." I'm like, if I'd like, of course I would. So I go and 90 minutes, 2 hours after the title is won, there I am holding the Larry O'Brien trophy, and getting a chance to have a picture, with the trophy by myself, one with Jonesy, one with our entire crew, a party then that went into a restaurant in San Francisco well into the early hours of the morning, and not going to sleep, and hopping on a flight home the next day on literally no sleep, and coming home to a mini street party that my neighbors had organized. It was amazing. It was amazing to just kind of be right in the middle of all of it. And it's clearly something that I'm never going to forget.
That's amazing to hear, Eric. As a aspiring broadcaster myself, just putting myself in your shoes for a moment here, kind of, working early days for the Raptors, grinding to get where you are today, and then being there for that epic moment like you just described for all of us, like that must have just felt so good. And that just a true testament to your hard work and never giving up, where I'm sure there were times where you felt maybe like, is this going to result to where I wanted to go? But you kept pushing through, and to say that you are a part of history, that's got to feel really, really good.
Well, it does. And I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. And it's, listen, at the end of the day, I've been very lucky, very privileged to be able to work in professional sports and to call games for the last 15 years and to cover games for the last 20 plus. My father was my mother was an elementary school teacher. My father was a steel worker in Hamilton, Ontario, at Tafasco for 35 plus years. Like that's hard work. Both of those jobs, that's work. I get paid to watch sports and talk about sports. Now, that said, from the sporting perspective, as we're discussing here, as you noted, there were a lot of bad years. The team right now that fans have grown to love, and understandably so, has been great for the better part of the last 3/4 of a decade. A consistent playoff team. Even if we're talking about the years, the year getting bounced in the first round by Brooklyn, or the frustration of getting bounced by Washington as well.
Yeah.
Those were still playoff years at least. Those weren't 20-62 seasons, which I've been through. Those weren't 25 win years, 33 win years. Coaches being fired, general managers coming and going and whatnot, players coming and going. I've seen a lot, and I've been through a lot, and to see this now where it stands, not only, and this kind of ties into my call that I had at the end of Game 6 when they won the title. This team has grown from, in my opinion, a team that was very local. Like I would even argue it was very much Toronto, but if we want to extend it to the GTA and talk about the greater Toronto area, even the Golden Horseshoe, Southern Ontario, but then it grew to a provincial, then it grew to a national, and now it's grown into an international global. And I think to see that kind of balloon and build over the years has been amazing to see. It's been gratifying. It's been satisfying just to see how much the fan base has grown and how much the interest in the sport has grown.
Yeah, it's crazy. Even where I live on the street, seeing all the kids playing sports. About 10, 15 years ago, you would see all hockey nets lined up. Well, now I see all basketball nets on my street of kids playing who are, 10, 11, 12 years old. So again, that just speaks volumes to how much the sport has grown in the country as a whole. Eric, let's switch gears here and let's talk about this current Raptors team. So of course, we know the reality that the NBA will be coming back on July 31st with a 22-team format. What's your reaction to that? And also, how do you think the Raptors are going to fare, not only with their 8 regular season games that's lined up for them, which is a tough stretch of games, but also going into the postseason, playing in uncharted territory of, no fans in the stands?
I like the fact that, and we can only really compare it right now, Luca, I guess, to the NHL because, obviously we're not even thinking about the NFL until September or until they ultimately decide that they maybe need to do something to tweak either their schedule or their format. I think football, again, we can kind of put on the back burner. We still don't really know what's happening with Major League Baseball, even though it sounds like we might be getting a little bit closer to a decision. So the only thing I can compare it to, at least in terms of the 4 majors, is hockey. And I'm still a little bit confused by what hockey's actually doing. I mean, if you ask me to explain their format right now and their postseason and who gets in and who doesn't, and I'm still not entirely sure I understand how it works. So to that point, I like the fact that the NBA didn't get too gimmicky with what they're doing. I was never a fan of, and this might sound revisionist now, but you can go back and find my tweets or whatever, and I had a little, back and forth with my colleague, Michael Grange. I was never a fan of the 1-16 reseeding, having East playing West. And I was also never a fan of this idea of kind of going like a World Cup or World Championship style with, groups and the group of death and phases and all that. Forget it. Why? To me, Luca, the point was these are already unprecedented times. Yeah. There is already kind of confusion and chaos with the world, let alone with the sporting world and the NBA specifically. Why then split the atom even more? Why confuse things even more than they're already confused? Yeah, stick to as close to normal as you can. And on top of that, if you have the luxury and the ability, as the NBA clearly has, to home or to house every single team under one roof at Disney World in one sort of gated community, then why was there ever even a thought to needing to, intermix and mingle East and West together? You can still operate East versus West because you're all under one roof. You don't need to split it up. There isn't one arena here and one arena here. There's just one place. So I like the fact that they're keeping the same format and the only real wrinkle being the battle for the 8th seed. And I think that the league had to do that in order to say, all right, from a competitive standpoint, we can't simply just say, oh, sorry, based on a March 10th or 11th date that nobody knew was coming, you're out of the playoffs. You have no chance to get in. You need to at least provide the opportunity for some of those fringe teams, those bubble teams, to at least have the chance to get in. So that's where the one wrinkle comes. And I think in the grand scheme, it's not that big of a deal, not that big of an impact to really kind of change the format of what the history of your league has been with its usual or regular playoff format. And then I think the 8 games also then creates competitiveness for the other seeds. To your point, talking about the Raptors, so many people are focusing right now on whether Portland or New Orleans or San Antonio gets in, and does Memphis miss out, and is there any hope in hell that Washington slides in or whatever. Well, how about a team like the Toronto Raptors that in all likelihood won't catch Milwaukee for number 1, but very easily could be caught by the Boston Celtics and drop down thus to 3rd or even 4th. So these games matter, and it's going to be a tough grind. And suddenly for these guys to be off by the time July 31st rolls around, to be off for 4+ months, to then be expected to hit the ground running and be playing at the top of their game for 8 games before suddenly, boom, the playoffs start. It's going to be tough. And you said it, the Raptors schedule is not easy. I heard Grange even actually the other day mentioning, and I'm going to screw the numbers up, if I try to speak exactly, but I believe he said the total winning percentage for the teams that the Raptors have remaining was, I believe, over 650, whereas the games that the Celtics have is under, I believe it was under 45%.
Yeah.
So there's a major difference in the level of competition that the Celtics will face versus the Raptors. So these 8 games are going to be no cakewalk by any means. And I like the fact that you're playing meaningful games, not just some sort of preseason tune-up of meaningless games that carry no value. No, it matters. And I think that's why it legitimizes, in my opinion, the championship that ultimately is won, because you're not only playing 8 very meaningful games, but you're then playing a 7-game first round, a 7-game second round, a 7-game conference finals, a 7-game finals. There is no asterisk, in my opinion, when the dust settles. This is still a legit champion, whomever ultimately wins the title.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because a lot of people are saying, just through the grapevines of Twitter and social media, that whoever wins the championship in this pandemic shortened season, there's going to be an asterisk on it. But you just brought up the point where, you could argue it's actually more impressive for a team to come back after all this time off and win under these circumstances. So we'll see what happens there. And I mean, going back to the Raptors schedule, they're playing the Bucks a couple of times, the Lakers, their weaker opponents, if you want to call them that, are going to be the Grizzlies, who of course are going to be fighting for their playoff lives. Eric, assuming the Raptors do hold on to that 2nd seed, because I believe right now they do have a 3-game advantage over the Celtics. How do you see them faring in the playoffs? Do you realistically think this team could get back to a final?
I do. I would say my answer to that question, Luca, would be the same or very similar to last year. And again, you can go back and find any comments I made. This is not trying to be Monday morning quarterback or revisionist and making myself sound good. I believed last year that the Raptors had every reason to think they had a chance to go to the finals. Now, all things being equal and everybody being healthy and et cetera, did I say at the beginning of last season that they would win the title? No. But did I feel like they had a chance to go and at least have a chance to win it? Yes, because I looked at the competition and I felt Milwaukee's very good. Boston is very good, and who knew about injuries and how that might impact them. Philadelphia, very good. To me, there were a lot of teams that could say, we are very good, we have a chance to be number 1. Hence the reason I think last year's postseason was as challenging as it was, not just for Toronto, but for a lot of teams, because there was such parity, I believe, at least in the Eastern Conference specifically. And then going into this season, I was never in the camp of those that felt the Raptors were going to miss the playoffs, which I thought was ridiculous. But even saying that they were going to be a 6, 7, 8 seed and not a top 5 seed, I looked at it and said, all right, realistically speaking, I feel like Milwaukee is the best team in the conference. Just talent alone on paper, with the reigning MVP, with a squad that was number 1 in the NBA last year with, I believe, 60 wins. They're the best team in the East. And they'll likely be the number 1 seed again. But even without Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, I don't believe that Toronto should be thinking we can't compete with the Celtics, we can't compete with Philadelphia. And I did not see Indiana being as good as they were, especially without Oladipo for the first 50-odd games. And I didn't see Miami being as good as what they ultimately were this season. So when I thought about those 4 teams, or I guess technically those 3 teams, Toronto, Philadelphia, and Boston, I thought, hey, come on, it's a crapshoot. You've got a chance to at least be the 2nd seed. You get me into the 2nd seed again, all bets are off. I've already proven it last year how good I can be. I've already proven what I can do. I've already proven, I can win a tough 7-game series against a 76ers team that was a matchup problem for the Raptors. A team that won 4 straight against Giannis after being down 0-2 and in double overtime facing, staring down the barrel of being down 0-3. 4 straight wins to beat Giannis. So to me, there's every reason to think that Toronto could be as good this year with the championship pedigree, with the experience that they now bring. And given the fact that I would argue, as much as the Raptors maybe in some people's eyes are missing a key weapon in Kawhi, which would certainly help, let's be honest, to have him. I look at the other squads and say Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, they've been very good for the Celtics. Again, the Heat have been very good. 76ers have taken a step back this year. Can they find that groove come the playoffs? Is Indiana truly ready to make that next step? Did Milwaukee get better this year, or did they just get, more experience last year? Point being, pound for pound, player for player, the Raptors still stack up matchup, I think, against a lot of those top squads. So all bets are off come playoff time. We could sit here, if we were doing the show in Miami, in Philly, in Boston, and in Milwaukee, we could probably make the case for any one of those teams.
Yeah.
And we could make the case why the Raptors could get bounced in the first round. And yeah, maybe they might because the competition is so tight. But at the same time, if you were to tell me that you've got a theory as to why they might be in the finals, I'd say, yeah, I can see that too, because I think that parity in the East still exists.
Eric, who in your opinion needs to step up come playoff time for the Raptors? Give me a Raptors X Factor that you got in mind.
That's a great question. I guess the first name that comes into my mind more than anybody, well, I'll give you two. The first one that pops into my mind would be Marc Gasol, and the second would probably be Norm Powell. And I'll explain both. I feel like Lowry has been solid again this season, another all-star year. There's no denying that Siakam has been incredible for most of the year. He might have had a little bit of a dip, but he's been pretty damn steady. Ibaka is having a career year. Van Vliet's been fantastic. You're getting the unexpected, I think, from Terrence Davis. But the one guy, predominantly because of injuries, and I think fatigue of having played a hell of a lot of basketball last year through the finals and then into the summertime with Spain, Marc Gasol, you need him. You need him come playoff time. You need him to find what he found in the postseason last year, whether it be against the Magic in round 1, Embiid in round 2, trying to slow down Lopez in round 3 and in the conference finals, and just his floor presence, his passing ability, his spacing, his intelligence, all of that. You need that come playoff time. And Powell, as good as he's been incredible this year. Again, he's missed 20-plus games, and he's the spark off the bench. As well and as intrigued as we've been by Davis, who I just mentioned, I don't know if you can know for sure that you can rely on a rookie come playoff time, or know that there's not going to be at least a little bit of hesitancy or nervousness for at least a few games come playoff time. Ditto for a guy like Matt Thomas, who's had his ups and downs and missed 20-plus games. But Norm, being a steady young vet who's been there, done that, he's the one guy that you say, hey, man, when we're going to the bench, you got to bring it. You've got to bring it on both ends. We need that spark from you. So I would say those are the two guys more than any that I would say are kind of X factors for Toronto.
And not to mention, I mean, Marc Gasol's looking like he's in his mid-20s again.
Yeah,
I mean,
based on those pictures, right? Yeah.
Unbelievable shape he's gotten himself into. And that's the thing I'm most looking forward to. We're going to have a healthy Raptors team. Assuming everybody comes back 100%. Obviously, you saw the pictures of Marc Gasol, Lowry being in incredible shape. That's something we haven't said all season long, Eric, of this Raptors team being fully equipped with all their weapons. I think that's going to make for intriguing basketball, and that's going to give them, as you mentioned, as good of a shot as anybody else in the East. So,
yeah, I mean, I as I noted, you've got Gasol, Thomas, Powell all missed 20-plus games, and then Siakam, Van Vliet, Lowry. Who am I forgetting?
Ibaka missed some time.
Ibaka, yes, all missed 10-plus, and I think a couple of them 15-plus. I mean, it's been in and out of the injured list for the Raptors this year, and that's not even to mention a guy like Stanley Johnson, whether we even thought he was going to be in the rotation at the beginning of the year. He missed 40 games, I believe. I think he only ended up appearing in 20 games this season. And Rondae Hollis-Jefferson missing over 10 games as well. I mean, the list goes on. This team has been ravaged by injuries, yet somehow, Luca, here we are talking about the NBA restart. The Raptors are second in the East, third overall in the NBA, first in the NBA in opponents' points per game, just ahead of the Bucks, and second in the NBA in opponents' field goal percentage. So their defense, in spite of all of the turnover in their roster on a seemingly week-to-week, month-to-month basis because of injuries, their defense has traveled and it's continued to be solid. Their offense has taken a little bit of a dip, at least in terms of the consistency or the efficiency with their field goal percentage. I think they're still scoring at a pretty good clip, but as we say every year, cliche or otherwise, defense matters in the playoffs, and the Raptors have proven yet again under Nick Nurse to be one heck of a defensive team this year, no matter who they're plugging into the lineup.
Yeah, it truly is incredible to see. Eric, since I do have you on the line here, I'm going to put you on the spot. I mean, let's make some predictions. Who do you got meeting in the NBA Finals, and who will ultimately be your pandemic champion?
You know what? I hadn't even thought about it till you asked the question right now. To me, again, I don't want to dodge your question here because we just said a couple of minutes ago I could make the case for at least 4 teams in the East.
Yeah.
It would not surprise me. It would not surprise me at all to see the Raptors back in the finals. It wouldn't. But that said, how am I going to sit here and discount the Milwaukee Bucks or even the Boston Celtics? So, again, I'm ducking a little bit. It's going to be, in my mind, one of those 3 teams. I don't think as good as the Heat are. They're ready to ultimately go to the finals. Same for Indiana. And I'm concerned about Philadelphia and the fact that they kind of took a step back this year. And I question, whether Joel Embiid is truly ready to kind of take that next step and be on that mantle. He's a hell of a player. I just don't see Philly there yet. And I don't think Brooklyn or Washington or Orlando has enough to really be, a first-round upset team, let alone a team that can make a run all the way to the finals. I think in the Western Conference, no great surprise. I would say Lakers or Clippers here. I think those are your 2 top teams. The way that LeBron has played this year, though, and it's a big if he can come back after a 3-month layoff, almost 4-month layoff by the time the league starts, if he can come back at the same level with the same strength, fitness level, defensive tenacity, offensive efficiency, you name it. I could go on the accolades and the attributes for LeBron. If he can come back with that, I think the Lakers are the team to ultimately come out of the West. And I would say the Lakers, more than any team right now, may be the team to beat.
Very interesting, to say the least. We'll see. Again, yeah, I agree with you. You can make a ton of cases for so many different teams in the East, and I agree with your stance in the West, although I would go the Clippers way, but I think it's going to be either or, Clippers, Lakers hoisting that championship. So time will tell. Eric, before I let you go, I got one last segment I want to do with you, rapid fire. So let's just dive right into it. It'll be a ton of fun. Right. First question here. If you could trade lives with one athlete, who would it be?
Oh, man. Do I get to have their body too?
Yeah, you get to have their lifestyle, their body, everything.
I'll go with LeBron then. I'll go with LeBron.
Smart choice, especially given his body at his age. If you weren't a broadcaster, what would you want to be?
Man, I know this is supposed to be rapid fire, but I'll tell you one thing that I wanted to do way back in the day, and I'm talking this was even before, or excuse me, after childhood. This isn't like, a 5-year-old saying, I want to be a police officer one day. I want to be a doctor one day. I actually really did consider for a while being a firefighter. And It's something that intrigued me for quite a while. And I'll tell you the other thing, too, is I did like the idea, probably more from television than anything else. I like the idea of being a private investigator and just kind of the research and the digging that goes into something like that and trying to dig up dirt or dig up clues and find things. So being an investigator in some senses. But the firefighter aspect was something that I always found interesting when I was younger.
Hey, you're a young guy. Who's to say you can't do that after your broadcasting career? Just saying.
Maybe.
Your least favorite beverage?
My least favorite beverage. As terrible as this might sound, I actually really don't like water. As terrible as that might be, I'm one of those guys that needs to have. First of all, it has to be room temperature. I don't like it cold, so I'd rather have the bottle sitting on the counter, not even coming out of the tap, let alone coming out of the fridge. I'm not a big water guy. But if moving beyond water, because we know how important it is, I would think that my least favorite beverage would be like some sort of grape soda or something. Like that. I'm like a cola guy. Give me a cola, I'm good to go. I'm not a big fan of other flavored sodas.
You're the first person who's said to me they don't like water. Wow.
I know, it's bizarre. I'm weird.
That's the biggest takeaway from this podcast. How do you like your steak cooked?
I don't eat steak.
Oh, okay. Are you a vegetarian?
I was a vegetarian for about 4 months last year, and then because my wife started yelling at me about needing more protein and iron and all this, I've pretty much cut it down to I'll have the odd hamburger, but I'd say 95% of my meat in my diet is chicken. I don't really eat, again, other than the odd hamburger, I haven't had a steak, Luca, in 25 years at least.
Wow.
But pork, the odd time, and when I say pork, it's bacon. I don't eat pork chops. I don't do turkey. It's pretty much chicken, and I have a lot of falafel and a lot of vegetables and a lot of chips and cookies and whatnot too. But so I'm trust me, I'm not trying to sit here and tout being a pillar of health by drinking no water and eating lots of potato chips. But I'm just not a big steak guy. I'm not a big meat guy in general. Interesting.
If you could choose your nickname, what would it be?
I've had a lot. I think E is just the easy one. I actually hate Smitty. Some people call me Smitty, even close friends of mine and fellow broadcasters, whatever. And listen, I don't get angry about it. I still answer to it. It is what it is. It's just, to me, it's kind of it's a very easy, very lazy nickname for a guy with the last name Smith. So I just was never a fan of Smitty. But I've had a bunch. Like I have close friends of mine that have just dropped the E. So instead of just shaving my name down to E like so many others do, I have other friends that drop the E and have called me Rick, which sounds weird. So I've got a couple of close friends that just I answer to Rick. And John Wells from TSN, way back in the day when TSN was actually affiliated with a lot of the radio programming with the Fan. Wellesley used to come in all the time. And I guess because at the time that I knew him especially, I was this young single guy in Toronto, and he always used to call me Hollywood. And that sort of, I don't know why, but that sort of stuck with him. And then with others, where some people around the station would call me Hollywood. So I mean, I've got a lot of nicknames, but I think E is just the easiest one, and I don't mind it.
Your favorite superhero ever?
I just finished watching all of the Marvel movies. I told you about Smith Family Movie Nights. We watched all of the Marvel movies from beginning to end in order, like in the way that you should watch it, not in the order they were released, but in the order you're supposed to. I don't know truly that I have a number one, a bona fide number one. So I'll give you three again, and two are Marvel and one is DC. I love Black Panther. I love that movie. That might be my number one Marvel movie. I loved Black Panther. I'm a big fan of Thor as well. And then how do you not like Batman? So those would be the three.
And last one here, Eric, who would win in an arm wrestle, you or Paul Jones?
Jonesy.
Without a doubt.
Without hesitation. My arms are pipe cleaners, and Jonesy, I think, listen, I don't want to be the one to reveal his age, but let's just say he looks a lot younger than he is, not only in his face, but I mean, I joke all the time on the air, Luca, and I say this half tongue in cheek because he is pretty cut for a slightly older guy. I joke all the time on the air about him going home and doing his laundry on his abs and the washboard abs or whatever. So Jonesy would beat me in an arm wrestle hands down 10 out of 10 times.
Well, you know what? He does look pretty jacked, and you guys got pretty good jobs too, so I'm sure stress isn't an issue a lot of the times. Eric, thank you so much. That's going to conclude our rapid fire and our show. I really appreciate you doing this. As someone who's watched you for a while, man, thank you so much, and hopefully we can do this again.
All right, man. I appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.
There you have it, guys. Eric Smith. Please go check him out on all social media channels. Like, subscribe, share, and I'll catch you all again in the next video. Peace out.